Good morning everyone, my dear students, and today we're going to talk about something more important. I think it's very important for us to talk about relative clauses. I don't know if you remember, we talked about relative clauses last class. Please let me refresh your memory. We talked about two types of relative clauses, right? Do you remember them? We talked about the defining relative clauses, right? And non-defining relative clauses. I think relative clauses are important for giving specific information. We use relative clauses for giving extra information, and that information would be essential or not essential. If the information is essential, it's a defining clause, right? But if the information that is given through the clause is not essential, so it's non-defining. Keep that in mind because we're going to talk about something related to relative clauses. And our topic would be on the page 71, okay? We talked about relative clauses from the page 68, right? But now we have to move forward to the page number 71. And on the page 71, you have something similar, right? The relative clauses, but in this case, you have reduced relative clauses. That means that we make relative clauses. We used to have a subject or a pronoun, in this case the relative pronouns. Do you remember the relative pronouns, right? And what are the relative pronouns? The relative pronouns who, which, that, and whose, right? And these are the relative pronouns, and the relative pronouns used to have a verb, almost like a sentence, right? Remember, a clause it's similar to a sentence, okay? It's the same, okay? But in this case, this relative pronoun or relative clause goes into another sentence, right? So let's go to the page number 71, page 71, and on the page 71 we have this famous, the reduced relative clauses, okay? What are reduced relative clauses? As the name says, reduced relative clauses is the reduced form of the relative clause itself. For example, if we say, there are actually an example, if you go to the page number 71, there you will have these expressions and these examples. It says, let me read it to you. Instead of using a full relative clause, we can sometimes use a present or past participle after a noun. Okay, for example, if we have this sentence, right? There were lots of people who were having the same problems as my sister. Okay, this is the complete sentence, right? What is the relative clause there? The relative clause is who were having, right? Who were having. But this part of the sentence we can give a brief form. We can reduce it, okay? We can make it shorter. How? We can replace who were having with having. And the rule goes like this. If the verb in the original relative clause is active, okay? If the verb in the original relative clause is active, we use the present participle ing form, okay? This is the present participle. So the sentence would be like this. There were lots of people having the same problem as my sister. Okay? So let me give you another example. Remember, we can reduce the relative clause if the relative clause is active. Okay? I think you have an idea about what is active voice and passive voice. So keep that in mind. Let me give you another example. For example, this is the sentence. Anyone who does that can save money. That's the relative clause. Anyone who does that can save money. Okay, what is the relative clause? Who does that? That is the relative clause, right? So we can reduce it. How, teacher? We can use the ing form. So let me give you the result. The sentence with the relative clause reduced would be anyone doing that can save money. Okay, you got it? So we can reduce relative clauses. We can make them shorter than before. They have to be in the active voice, okay? Active voice. So let's go for another rule. There is another rule on the page 71. Please read it with me. The relative pronoun must be the subject, it says. The relative pronoun must be the subject, not the object. Okay, the subject, not the object of the verb in the relative clause. For example, you have there people who plan save their money, spend it anyway, right? So what is the relative clause? Who plan, right? Who, the relative pronoun, and plan the verb, right? That is the relative clause. But we can reduce it. How? We can use the ing form. For example, the sentence would be with the relative clause reduced would be like this. People planning, right? Planning. People planning to save their money, spend it anyway. Okay? But remember, if the subject, okay, the relative pronoun is the subject, not the object. There is, for example, another sentence in which the subject is not actually the subject but the object. For example, there is an example there. Focus on this sentence. Give the money that you are saving, okay, to your parents. Give the money that you are saving to your parents. What is the relative clause there? It's that you are saving, right? But what you are saving? Money. And money here is not the subject. Money is the object. So that's why you cannot do this relative clause reduce with this sentence. Okay? Let's go with the next rule. Letter C. There you have. If the verb in relative clause is passive, okay, we use the past participle. Okay, we can reduce relative clauses if the relative clause in the sentence is in the passive voice. Okay, so I think you need previous knowledge, okay, for doing this, because for example, we need to know what is the active voice and the passive voice. And I suppose you know. If you don't know how to identify the passive voice or the active voice, please check out a video on YouTube, and I think there you will have more explanation. Again, the rule. If the verb in the relative clause is passive, we use the past participle. Remember that. So let me give you an example. This is the sentence. The coffee that is sold, okay, that is sold, that's the relative clause, right? The coffee that is sold in coffee shops costs a fortune. Okay, the coffee that is sold in coffee shops costs a fortune. Okay, what is the relative clause there? The relative clause is that is sold, right? We can reduce this by using just the verb in past participle. For example, the sentence would be like this. The coffee sold in coffee shops costs a fortune, right? That would be the reduced relative form. Let me give you another example. Remember, if the relative clause is passive, we can do this, okay? If the relative clause is in passive voice, we can do what we are doing now. Another example. They've stopped buying products which are considered essential by most of us. Okay, one more time. They've stopped buying products which are considered essential by most of us. Okay, what is the relative clause there? The relative clause is which are considered, right? But we can reduce, okay, please recognize this, which are considered, it's a relative clause in passive voice. So since this sentence is in the passive voice, we can make it in a shorter version just by using the verb in the past participle form. So the sentence would be like this. They stopped buying products considered essential by most of us. So these are reduced relative clauses, and I think they are really important because they help you to explain and give more data, more information about what you are talking about. Okay, so that will be all for today. I hope you can enjoy these classes, and especially with Mr. Jose Bustamante, who is a wonderful teacher, and I give all my greetings to you. Thank you guys for your attention, and I will be seeing you the next time.